So apart from educating the community, educating the concerning prevailing health problems and methods of prevention and control, then promotion of food supply and proper nutrition, then adequate supply of safe water and basic sanitation, maternal and child health care. These are all the regular activities. Then in addition to this, there is an immunization programs, regular immunizations against infectious disease, then prevention and control of local endemic diseases. Prevention and control of local endemic diseases. Because the major role played by primary health centers, they are the first respondent to the local endemics. Then appropriate treatment of common diseases, then provision of essential drugs. So the first one, there are 8 components which include education about the prevailing health problems, control, prevention and control of prevailing health problems through education, then providing water and sanitation facilities, then food supply, then the 4th one, maternal and child health care, then 5th one, immunization, then 6th one, prevention and control of local endemic diseases, 7th one, appropriate treatment for common diseases, then provision of essential drugs. So these are all the major elements were concentrated by primary health centers. The first three elements, education, providing supply, providing food supplies, then what is that, the third one, adequate supply of safe water and basic sanitation. These 3 things comes under promotive services. This 3 things comes under promotive services, and the middle 3 are preventive services. The middle three, the 4th one, maternal and child health care, 5th one, vaccination, 6th one, prevention and control of local endemic diseases. This comes under preventive services. Then the last 2 services are curative services. Last 2, appropriate treatment for common diseases, then provision of essential drugs. So this 3 comes under curative service. So all these 3 elements, promotive service, preventive service and curative service, is taken care under primary health care. Someone is waiting. So after 2000, there are extended elements also were included under primary health care. Initially, that 8 components were given importance under initial 1978 declarations. After that, 1988, the importance were given that programs were started implementing from after 2000. That one, expanded options of immunizations. Initially, they concentrated only limited number of immunization programs. Later, they expanded. Even now, they are going more than 20 immunization programs. I don't know how many immunization programs were commonly available in Gambia, but in my country, there are more than 24 immunization programs were given under free of cost through primary health care to each and every citizens who are living in that particular primary health centers, up to from 0 to 18 years time. So then now they were included reproductive health services, reproductive health needs, and also they are providing provision of essential technology for healthcare. Now you can able to do ECG from your primary health centers. Then the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases also now they are concentrating, and also food safety and provision of selected food supplements also the responsibility of primary healthcare. I am going to mute. If you are speaking, I am going to mute you all. So now we somewhat we discussed the concept of primary healthcare. We started with the historical background, then we learned the definitions, then the principles, then before principles we discussed types of primary healthcare. We discussed. After that we learned the principles, then elements of primary healthcare. Now we are moving to ethical issues in community health, or even you can say primary healthcare. So the ethic, I hope you understand what is ethical issues. Before straight away we discuss ethical issues, we need to understand the doctor and patient's relationship. Mostly the doctor-patient relationship has been governed by system of medical ethics. The doctor-patient relationship has been governed by system of medical ethics. The medical ethics were drawn from Hippocrates. I know who is Hippocrates? Father of medicine, who was born during, I think, 17th century. The father of medicine, Hippocrates, he was born. He was the one who introduced English medicine, or you can say allopathic medicine. So the doctor-patient relationship has been governed by system of medical ethics run from the writings of Hippocrates, then Chinese medicine, then Indian medicines, and other oral traditions. All this, the ancient medical writings were emphasized doctor-patient relationship. So the doctor-patient relationship is governed, or it's guided by medical ethics. So any healthcare professionals, the healthcare professionals are expected to base their practice on a set of ethical principles. So when you are doing a practice, you are guided by certain ethical principles. These ethical principles were drawn from medical ethics. So you need to truthfulness. The few ethical principles I am mentioning here, which include truthfulness to your patients, then beneficency, then you are giving whatever you are doing, it's supposed to be benefiting to the patients, then non-malfeasiency, then justice and confidentiality. These are all the principles you need to give an importance to your patients. You need to, if you are taking a decision, you are going to truthful to your patients, then the beneficency, it encourage as a doctor, you are going to benefiting the learnings or your studies supposed to beneficency to your client or your patients. Then non-maleficiency, you supposed to all the times you supposed to ready, you are competent to treat your patients. There is no lacking in terms of quality. You all the times you supposed to be a non-maleficiency. You should avoid the non-maleficiency, or you should be ready to treat patient with the quality. Then you need to make sure justice to your patients and confidence. You need to maintain the confidentiality about the patient's rights and other things. So the ethical issues, mainly before going to discuss the ethical issues, these things we need to make sure, we need to understand. Doctor-patient relationship is governed by medical ethics. Medical ethics were drawn from the writings of Hippocrates, Chinese medicines and Indian traditions and other traditional medicines. How to relate with your patients. Mostly these things were drawn from the earlier writings. Then the healthcare professionals are, the current days healthcare professionals are expected to base their practice on set of ethical principles, which include truthfulness, beneficency, non-maleficiency, justice, and confidentiality. these things already there, but still the medical professionals or the healthcare providers, they are facing a lot of challenges from their day-to-day practice. Because the individual patients today, they exercise autonomy and informed consents in deciding each and every patients. The individual patients today, they exercise autonomy and informed consents in deciding their deciding whether or not to accept or continue with their treatment, even to continue to live, to become subject to research, to permit the use of personal health data for study purpose, to be told or not told to the truth, to permit the use of embryo, to donate organs and withdraw life supporting systems. These are all the complicating things. Because you are treating another individuals. You because you are playing others' life. So whatever you are doing, you're supposed to inform your patients. Maybe the positive and negative aspect of your treatment, or giving the probability you are going to explain to your clients or your patients. Maybe sometimes some people are doing some research. For that, they need to have their the consensus from their patients. For example, like in the current corona issue, the people who are treated uh, treated and recovered from corona, the medical community were asking them to provide the plasma from the recovered patients, because this plasma is going to support other new patients. So if you are openly told, if you are giving a blood, this is going to support, this is going to treat the new patients. So you are getting concerns from your existing patients for treating the new one. So, but this case, it's not going to, actual practice is different. Though these things, informed consents, self-autonomy, these things supposed to be practiced, but in practical terms, certain things were not practiced, especially in transplantations. In terms of kidney transplantations or the embryo transplantations, these things should be signed by the patient and doctors. So the individuals, like communities, are often subjected of research, such trials of drugs or vaccines or epidemiological studies. Some people who are living in deprivations or even oppressions are liable to exploitations. So without informing your patients, collecting blood samples, without informing your patients, collecting their body parts or blood samples, urine samples, this is going to be used for some other research purpose. This is ethically wrong. If you are collecting a blood samples, you need to inform them, this is going to be tested for this purpose, or we are doing a research. Are you participate this research? If you are participating, you are going to give your blood samples, or you are going to give your urine samples. So as a medical practitioner, you need to inform your patients about what you are doing. So but most cases, the individuals were not informed with the exact information. They are exploited in terms of research. So this is ethically wrong. So the researcher have particular ethical responsibility to safeguard the rights of such people and to observe scrupulously the ethical principles of beneficency, avoidance of harm, and justice. So the ethical issues mainly it come from in community health issues, when you are doing a research, or when you are doing a clinical trial, or when you are doing a vaccine trial, you need to inform your patients about your trial. May get concerns from your patients. If you are not getting concerns, but you are doing a clinical trial without informing the client or patients, it is ethically wrong. This is going to be the ethical issues. So informed consents supposed to be acquired from your patients when you are doing clinical trial or any kind of research or any kind of transplantations. So if you are doing these things, it is against the medical ethics. If you are not doing properly doing, it is against the medical ethics. Now we were moving to current status of primary health care in Zambia. So in Zambia, the primary healthcare services are provided through outreach posts. I already explained the primary setup. It is health post, then the health centers, then the district hospitals, then teaching hospitals. So in Zambia, the primary healthcare services are provided through outreach post, health centers, and district hospitals. These are linked to the community through health centers and neighborhood health committees. So this each level, outreach post and health centers were linked to the communities through health centers and neighborhood communities to the district hospitals. But these things, though it is in practice, it is there, but before 2016, there is no community health strategies. These setups were established when Zambia was signed Almata declarations. These setups were established, but it is not countrywide. It is not countrywide. Many parts of Zambia were not connected with these setups. But because there is no countrywide community health strategy was not available before 2019. During the year 2019 only, there is a national level community health strategy were drawn. So then there is another challenge in terms of primary health care. Previously, it was non-availability of community health strategy, but even though still now there's some recurring problems were prevailing. One of the recurring problem in terms of primary health care, it is non-availability of the expected human resource. The human resource challenge and the high dropout of community-based volunteers. It is one of the critical area which affecting primary health care. Human resource challenge and high dropout rate of community-based volunteers. For example, in 2016, there are 2 training institutions were developing community health workers. They are training at national level. There are 2 health institutions were developing health workers at national level, accredited institutions. They are developing healthcare workers. In 2016, there is a need for 5,000 healthcare workers, but they are producing 1,116 healthcare workers. The remaining people, it's a shortage or it's lacking manpower. That is reported under Community Health Strategy of 2016. Then and also a weak referral system, which has adversely affected the service delivery at community level. Even though the current primary health care, we have a setup from outreach post, health post, and health center and district hospital. But still, we are facing before 2016 there is no community health strategy. After that only the community health strategies came into practice. Still now the human resource challenges are high, and high dropout rate of community-based volunteers. Still now we are facing because most of the community-based volunteers are not paid. They are doing voluntary services. So the high-level dropout rate still it is big issue. Then the referral system it is a weak, which affect adversely the service delivery mechanism at community level. Then further, the neighborhood health and health center committees do not have supportive legal or regulatory framework. Still, it is a project mode. There is no concrete guideline for maintaining neighborhood health and health center committees. There is no legal backup. Then the weaker intersectoral collaborations at district level has also limited the effectiveness of community health interventions. Whatever points I am mentioning here, now you can just relate with the principles of primary healthcare. There is a weakness we can found in intersectoral collaborations. Then the community participation, it is there, but it is not found in supportive legal and regulatory framework. Then there is a big challenges in terms of human resource. Then the policy level, there is a lacking in policy level lacking also found. Apart from this weakness, Zambia came into national health and strategic plan, which came into practice from 2017 to 2021. So it's a 5-year plan. This 5-year plan giving priority to primary health care, maternal and neonatal and child health, youth and adolescent health care, then communicable diseases, especially giving importance to malaria, HIV/AIDS, STI and TB, and also giving importance to non-communicable diseases. Then the disease outbreaks and epidemic control, public health surveillance, environmental health and food safety, health service referral systems, health promotion and education, then community health and social determinants of health. These are all the important areas were given under National Health and Strategic Plan 2017 and 2021. So which include the 8 dimensions as well as extended dimensions also covered by Zambia. But I'm leave it this strategy, whether this strategy is fully implemented or not. It is a you need as a clinician, you need to critically analyze this part. But these are all the provisions were made under National Health and Strategic Plan. So now we were moving to organization of health services in Zambia. I already discussed this. We already discussed these things. The health system in Zambia classified into 3 major categories. First level, comprising of health posts, rural health centers, and district hospitals, where primary healthcare and preventive health services provided. Then the second level, comprising of provincial and general hospitals, which providing curative services. Then the tertiary level, comprising of general hospitals and national university teaching hospitals, which provide specialty care or specialized care. This arrangements of health services is alone same administrative lines with the district as the main focus of service delivery, and also the province as a secondary level and central, and the university teaching hospitals as a tertiary level care. This healthcare delivery systems, in terms of the physical facilities, in terms of numbers, health management is done through the entire system of management. Health system management is done through provincial health officers who are responsible for provincial healthcare, or you can say secondary healthcare services. Then district healthcare officers, provincial healthcare officers. There are 10 provincial healthcare officers who are responsible for looking after the secondary care in entire country. Then the district health officers, there are 105. They are responsible for primary healthcare at health post, primary health centers and district hospitals. Their number is 105. Apart from this, there are statutory bodies also looking after health management, like Health Professional Council of Zambia, General Nursing Council of Zambia, then the disease surveillance centers. These people are looking after health matters. So altogether, as a countrywide, there are 8 third-level hospitals, then 34 second-level hospitals, then there are 99 first-level hospitals, then 1,839 health centers, and 953 health posts were available. So out of 34 second-level hospitals, 8 second-level hospitals were owned by church bodies, remaining 26 owned by state. Then the health services in Zambia, it's provided by 4 main players. They are the main players actively played major role in healthcare of Zambia. So the government is the first and foremost stakeholder, then faith-based providers, then the miners, then the private providers. These are all the four players were taking major role in promoting healthcare. The public sector is the biggest healthcare provider. 90% of the patients seek care in facilities owned and run by the government. So the national level responsibility for overall coordinations and management, policy formulation, strategic planning, and resource mobilization is done by Ministry of Health. So now we are moving to school health program, which include water and sanitation. Not only water and sanitation, school health services. It is expanded program of immunization and water and sanitations. Before going to see what are all the programs who are available for children, for those who are going to school, we need to understand the present context. Not exactly the present context, the previous previous years, or you can say from after 2000. The children in Zambia, most of the children in Zambia, they were affected with vitamin A and iron deficiency are endemic among children in Zambia. Vitamin A and iron deficiency are endemic. Endemic means at the entire region were affected with the vitamin A deficiency, iron deficiency. It's a common problem which affects the children. Then the second one, the parasitic infestations due to unsafe drinking water, poor sanitation have contributed to the worsening the health and nutritional status of the learners or the school-going children. Due to parasitic infestations, due to unsafe drinking water, poor sanitation, which worstly affecting the health and nutritional situation of the learners. So there is no school health policy. This lack of school health policy are harmful traditional practices and poor source of water and sanitation. It's compound problem to school enrollment, retention, and learning achievements. But now the situation is little improved, but still you can find there is no comprehensive school health policy. So this, if you are coming up with the school health programs supported with the policies and strategies, is critical in improving not only the health and nutrition of learners, but also enhancing their academic performance and achievements and acquisition of life skills. So there is a greater need to come up with this school health program, which supposed to have a policy backup. Currently, children in Zambia, they are receiving, so in order to reduce the high level of malnutrition, the Government Republic of Zambia shall ensure, it's a proposal given by civil society, health and nutrition education is institutionalized at all levels of school systems. So the health and nutritional education is supposed to be incorporated institutionally at all levels of schools. There is no difference in community schools or other schools. It's supposed to be institutionalized. For example, in my state, those who are going to school, they received free food, milk, then the egg. So this is one way of attracting children to come to the school and also provide nutritious food. So health and nutritional education is supposed to be institutionalized at all levels of school system. Then eligible learners to receive micronutrient supplements. Those who are affected with the vitamin A deficiency or iron deficiency, they are supposed to be given micronutrient supplements. So eligible learner are those who are deficient, they need to receive micronutrient supplements. Then school deworming program supposed to be established. It's supposed to go continuously. School deworming program, it's supposed to establish at national level. Then food protection units are revitalized in all learning institutions. Every schools, they should have a kitchen. They should provide mini meal to the children. So you are attracting children as well as you are providing food, which they are not getting, which they are not able to get it from their house. So you need to make sure they need to be feed in their schools. Then school feeding services are initiated and communities are involved. School feeding programs supposed to be initiated by the state, which supposed to be community supposed to be involved. Then growth monitoring and promotion is institutionalized and implemented. These are all the recommendations were given by civil society organization to the state. Now this is end of unit 9. I hope from this unit now you can able to describe the historical development and challenges faced by primary health centers. We discussed only historical development. The challenges we need to study further. Then you can able to define what is primary health care and its concept. Then this you can able to describe various components, strategies, and principles in primary health centers. Then you can able to understand the importance of ethical issues in primary health centers, primary health care. Then you can able to describe and discuss existing health services and the importance of school health services. Now, I'm going to open up for discussion. If you have any question,